So my phone and computer clock tells me it's 10 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Humphrey. I am the GIS analyst from Montgomery County, which is located just north of Houston. I've been doing GIS for, believe it or not, almost 20 years. It's hard for me to believe that myself. I am a self-proclaimed map nerd, and I will be your host for the GIS and engineering. We have three great panelists here today who are all engineers and utilize GIS in their fields. And so we'll have them introduce each one of them, and then we'll get into some questions. If any of you have any questions, these are for the students. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat, and we'll try and get to as many as we can towards the end of our panel. So we'll begin with George. Why don't we get an introduction from you first?
All right, thanks, Nick. Good morning, everybody. Appreciate everybody being here. My name is George Culver. I am with LJA Engineering. I direct our GIS services here and have been doing so for the past over 2 decades. Organization-wise, LJA is 1,000+ employees. I mentioned that to kind of get down to the GIS side, where our GIS group, there's 20+ of us. We are officed within 5 different cities across 3 different states. So a pretty large GIS presence inside a engineering environment. So.
Great. Sorry, I was on mute there. Grant, why don't we get an introduction from you if you don't mind?
Yeah, this is Grant Garrison. I'm with the Port of Houston Authority. I've been at the port since about 2007, so going on about 14 years. We have about 550 employees at the port, with a number of different ship stevedores and contractors and consultants and what have you. So quite a few people either work at the port or work with the port. Prior to my experience with the port, I was with the Houston Galveston Area Council, did a lot of road mapping, traffic analysis, things of that nature. And then some other experience I had, I also worked at a oil and gas land administration firm, a company called Tobin. And then I've also worked at in a county engineer's office and worked with subdivision plats and things of that nature. So my background is pretty broad and cuts a lot of different industries and areas.
Yeah, great diversity there, that's for sure. Surya, how are you? Give an introduction of yourself, please.
Sure, Nick. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be on the live interview. So, as Nick said, my name is Surya Gade. The way to say it, the first name is Surya, Surya, right? I'm with Gulf Interstate Engineering. It's now called, rebranded as Gulf Companies. I'm the director of geospatial services. Have been with the company for about 11, 12 years now. Prior to that, I was with one more EPC firm. I am an engineer, mechanical engineer by trade, by education, and I practiced in the pipeline engineering for a while. So I wore many hats during my career. Right now, I'm overseeing GIS, which is pretty exciting stuff. The company itself, we've been in the business for about 70 years. We are a global firm. We have done projects all around the world. Currently, mainly, we've been in the pipeline engineering, but we are diversifying into solar and wind and other renewables. So it's kind of a pretty exciting time to be working in pipelines, because we are transporting CO2 for, it's kind of pretty interesting. If anybody has questions, you can reach out to me later. For now, that's it.
Great. Thank you so much. George, what situations have you used GIS in your field and working for LJA?
Well, let's see.
What type of products do you make, I guess?
Yeah, it's a pretty broad question, especially since I've been here for 20 years. So I don't think I'll be able to cover everything. I think much like the panelists here on here, we're all pretty diverse. One just based off of actual time and tenure, but the applications that we can do. I've been very fortunate that LJA, we are a utility forward organization. So we do a lot of land development, putting homes on the ground, designing subdivisions, things of that nature. So, GIS is kind of entangled within that through the entire process. So, aspects that we utilize GIS the most is to that really the entire life cycle of a development, from due diligence on initial piece of land to acquisition costs, all the way down to bringing in designed elements, laying down the utility lines, and then ultimately having a deliverable for our end client that wraps all that together for them.
Great. Grant, I've known you now for about 3 years, working through GIS data. I've often wondered, how does the port and GIS interact? What is that connection?
Yeah, it's a good question, Nick. So the port, multiple facets that we use GIS. One, obviously, is we want to track our cargo that comes in and out of the port. So that's one aspect of it. But the port is almost like a little mini city. Has a lot of infrastructure within the port. I mean, obviously, everybody thinks about docks and wharves and stuff like that. But there's a lot of other infrastructure at the port besides just the docks and the wharves. Roads. We get cargo comes in. We have to place the cargo that comes off the ship. So we have pavement yards where we store the cargo. We have roads in and out of the port that are used to get the cargo to and from. And so basically the port operates very similar to a small suburban type city, with all the, we have our own police department internally, we have our own fire department internally. And so we function very similar to, like I said, a small city. The unique difference is that our main mission is to move cargo in and out of the Port of Houston. So that's our focus, but we have a lot of the similar responsibilities that a small city would have.
Great. Surya, so you're a mechanical engineer by trade, and you've moved into GIS. How have you seen GIS grow and move and develop over the years? You've worked both as a mechanical engineer and then moving into as a GIS or geospatial supervisor, what the position you're at now.
So once again, the question is how the GIS transformed, or how
how has it transformed since you first became aware of it?
Sure. So the first time I was aware of GIS was one of the pipeline projects. You're supporting some permitting process, which is a FERC, a regulatory commission, Federal Regulatory Commission, right? So the permitting process is pretty intense, and some of the calculations that we do is by looking at the maps, literally hard-coded maps, and figuring out by pencil and paper in a way, or Excel. So GIS in that way, what we used was, obviously we use geospatial analysis to figure out the impacts on the environment, impacts on the land, impacts, land use and all the good stuff. And also from, as an engineer, we are trying to find the most cost-effective route. So we were using for that analysis as well, coming up with the alternative routes, right? So from that, we were using in that way, and now we used to have both GIS and mapping. GIS for analysis, and the mapping is for. We used to have CAD mappers where the CAD folks used to make the maps, and now GIS folks in the pipeline industry became more adept, and they are not only doing the analysis, but also creating the maps, and also there's a lot of Python scripting that's being done, and there's a usage of lately the ML/AI, the machine learning and artificial intelligence. Lately, it's been morphed into. We are getting into those areas from a geospatial services standpoint of view.
Great. George, you said you've worked for LJA or been working in GIS for 20 years or more. What do you enjoy so much about working in GIS, or maybe you don't and are ready to retire? But what is it that gets you up in the morning because you get to go do GIS? Is there something?
Sure, a whole bunch of things about that. I think we will probably hear through most of us and throughout the entire GIS days that there's so much variety to it. I mean, there truly is. Yes, I'm at a civil engineering company, so we do civil engineering type work, but that is not where we stop at, right? There's plenty of opportunity to keep something fresh every single day. The tangent off of that would be the fact that, you know, we are consultants, so we're constantly working with other groups with different intentions. So it's not just us creating data or maps or doing some web services. We're actually have the opportunity to get engaged with other people's GIS. Look how the structure is, organization side of things. So that's always very pleasant. And then plus just coming to work. We were just nominated #1 for the best working place in the Houston area. So that's pretty cool too. So that helps out.
Nice. That's great. Grant, what about you? You said you work at the port and you're not just tracking cargo, but you have a whole part of the city. What sort of gets your juices going in the morning that you get to go and work at this small suburban city?
Yeah. So I've always loved maps. For me, maps are like art. I know that sounds kind of corny, but that's just how I am. I've always loved maps, even as a kid. And so, you know, maps kind of fascinate me, and making them and you know, the symbology and the graphics and all of that is awesome. The other great thing about working at the port is every day is kind of different. It's there's different activities that are done, and so no day is the same. It's not necessarily monotonous. In my 14 years there, we've worked on all kinds of different stuff, and so that's one of the nice things I found is always learning new stuff, always doing new things, trying new things, and that keeps it interesting and keeps things exciting. But in the end, you know, you say what do I get up in the morning for? I love maps, and I like cartography and that sort of information, and that's kind of what drives me and gets me going.
Great. That's sort of where I'm at too. Surya, I mean, somebody who didn't come into, you know, study GIS as an undergrad, you're a mechanical engineer. What sort of gets you going and really liking the position that you're in and working with GIS daily?
Yeah, just like you said, I didn't go to school for GIS. To me, that gave me an edge. Initially, what looked like an impediment, you know, it actually gave me an edge because I was able to see things a little bit differently. So, so what gets me going here is really, you know, the technology, the usage of applications of the technology, you know, in the real world, and solving real world problems. You know, to me, the way it sounds like is, you know, same plot, different movie, different cast of characters. That makes it very interesting, you know. So, for example, when I say real world problems, you know, the same technology for one of the projects, it's a 600-mile, 42-inch pipeline. We had 6 surveyors with the 6 different ways of doing things, and applying the technology, you know, the GIS technology to that project was very interesting. Getting them up to speed, getting them buy into the technology and using it, and at the end of the day, seeing them buying into it and actually using it, kind of gives a pretty good satisfaction at the end of the day. You know, so to me, yeah, that's what keeps me going. And also, just like I said, the technology itself is evolving rapidly. And you know, you need to really get on to see how exciting those things are. Yeah,
absolutely. I totally agree. George, what advice would you give somebody that, I'm going to ask this to all 3 of you, so be thinking of your answer. What advice would you give somebody, because we're talking to high school students mainly here, that might be interested in a career in GIS in the field? Is there any advice you could give somebody? I'll start with George, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. Advice-wise, for high school coming in, if there is interest in GIS and maps, I will let you know there's plenty of opportunity after school. You know, I think probably all of us on this panel, you know, we probably all started before GIS was really even a thing. I think a lot of us actually kind of carved our own space within this environment. But since then, the acceptance of GIS as an industry standard that's not isolated to one type of sector. There's ample opportunity out there. There's a lot of great programs now that are really ingrained in GIS, and the auxiliary side of things too, right? We mentioned cartography and databases and things like that. That's all part of it. And yes, there's universities that are very engaged in that, but also don't forget or underestimate just the community college, the kind of short program for GIS. Surya mentioned about maybe a disadvantage of coming into this world with a mechanical engineering degree and not GIS. I tell folks, I don't think that's a disadvantage at all. I'd say probably 40% of the folks that are in our group right now, they do not hold a GIS degree. There was interest in the topic, and we can help further their GIS and understanding once they get into the workplace. But plenty of opportunity out there. Yeah, just go get it.
Absolutely. Grant, if you don't mind, same sort of question. What would you, somebody that's interested in this, what sort of direction would you steer them in, I guess?
Yeah. If the audience is particularly high school students, there's a number of local colleges, local junior college and community colleges that have GIS programs and offer GIS classes. And so, one step for a high school student would be maybe just stick your toe in the water and take a class or two and see if that still interests you after taking a couple classes and learning a little bit more about the technology and what's involved and kind of how it works. I think that would be a good starting place. I agree with George. It's not critical that you go get a quote unquote GIS 4-year degree. But definitely take some classes in GIS. And like I said, there's a number of local junior college and community colleges that you can do that, and without committing to a full 4-year degree type situation. And that'll give you enough exposure to decide whether that's something you really want to pursue. And then the other thing is a lot of the local junior colleges and community colleges have what they call a GIS certificate, which is not a 4-year degree, full enchilada kind of thing. It's a thing where it's about, 5 or 6 classes. And when you complete your classes, you receive a GIS certificate. That might be a good approach for a high school student, just kind of starting out is go down that path. And then if they decide later that they want to pursue a 4-year degree, whether it's in GIS or something else. I'd also chime in with what George said. The thing about GIS is it's not industry specific. In other words, we're talking today about engineering, but GIS it's holistic. It crosses all industries, whether it's real estate, oil and gas, and my personal experience is I've kind of worked in a bunch of different industries and used GIS extensively in all of them. So don't when you take GIS, keep an open mind, because the tools and the technology are applicable to almost all industries. So yeah, my suggestion would be for students, hey, if you want to stick your toe in the water, take a couple of classes, see if you like it, if the technology really does interest you and it's something you want to pursue. And then, like I said, there's always the certificate programs that you could go through and pursue that. That would be my suggestion. Great.
Sorry, the same question is, as the lead of the GIS department there, what type of people do you see? Are you hiring? What type of backgrounds do they have? What would you suggest to somebody that might be interested in getting into the GIS field?
Yeah, absolutely. First thing first, I strongly agree with what George and Grant mentioned. So to answer your question directly in terms of hiring, typically we hire from A&M or even we had some folks from Sam Houston, the 4-year degrees. But lately, In the past few years, I hired some folks from HCC, even the community colleges, just like Grant and George was mentioning about with the associate's degree. The reason being, so I'm going to dial back. Now I answer your question. So what do we need? First thing first, as a GIS, to get into GIS, what do you need? Even before you learn the GIS, right? It's the analytical skills. I think that's what we are talking about. And also Grant mentioned something about artistic side of the cartography, right? So if you're attuned to it, and team building, team skills, if you can work in teams, or even the people who are introverts, there's place for those folks as well. So the way I see it, coming in from a non-GIS background from a few years ago, getting into it, there are several pieces, right? One is the analysis part, there's the database part, there's the web part, there's the app, the apps itself. And there's a lot of pieces to this. So you can pick and choose whatever field you want in GIS. So GIS is, to me, that's why it is so fascinating. You can get to work with quite a few varieties of people. You don't really stick to just engineering. So a long time ago, I had a choice. Hey, do you want to be the compressor guy? That's all you're going to do. Right? Nothing wrong with that. It's just the choice, right? I made a choice to be more broader. So I'm glad I did. So I think GIS, gives a great opportunity. And just like George and Grant said, it doesn't take more than one course for you to fall in love or hate it. I think mostly you'll fall in love with it just because of the broad applications of it. All the things that you learn, the math, the coding, or Google Maps, how you observe, what is the science behind this data, the data intelligence part of it. It's pretty exciting. And we use all these varieties of things in our areas. Just like I said earlier, we are primarily in pipelines, but we are moving into solar and wind. The reason why we are able to do it is we can apply these skills pretty easily. It's once you find some domain knowledge, right? So long story short, I'm hiring folks from even with a associate's degree, as long as people can demonstrate that those skills, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time to get on board.
Great, thank you so much. I want to thank each and every one of you for helping me with this panel today, George, Grant, and Surya. I want to open it up now to questions from the students. If they have any questions, if they would type them in the chat. I found that that's the best. Last panel I did, we had a pretty bad echo. So if there's any questions, Laura, if you can help me look at the chat. My chat's on, but if you see any that I miss, please let me know. If there's any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat. We got a few minutes left here.
I think we got everybody excited.
Yeah. I believe there's two, Nicole. So question from the chat, is there a, let me go back up. Is there an environmental sustainability agency of any kind in GIS? Anybody want to take that environmental sustainability?
Yeah. You wanted to go first? Yeah.
You work with it? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
The way I see it, I think, the question is about ESG. So the way I'm seeing it is about EPA. We work constantly with NEPA, and not just federal, but also state and local governments to make sure the environmental impacts are pretty minimal. And also the social part is, once again, pipelines from A to B. It could be 100 miles, it could be 1,000 miles. Right now, we're working on a 2,000 mile, which is cutting across 5 different states. And we worked on a 2,000 kilometer job in Africa. So there's a environmental and a social aspect inevitably. You got to deal with those, and that's something we work day in, day out to make environment a little bit safer than when we start to begin with, and also socially, the social groups would have minimal impact. I don't know whether I answered the question.
Yeah. George, I think you deal with a lot of environmental stuff and working with putting in subdivisions and such, right?
Absolutely. To answer the question about, the environmental side of GIS. And actually, I can kind of wrap both those into the next question there from Paul also. If we stay with that kind of student aspect in the educational system, each one of those degrees, whether we're talking about environmental or we're talking about civil engineering, most of those degrees now of some sort, do ask you to take some supplemental GIS course. It's typically not part of the, requirements for that particular degree. I can tell you firsthand right now, I've got a daughter going through a environmental program over on the West Coast, and probably once a week she hears about GIS. And it's not her degree, it's not what she has to do to get through the university, but it is something that is asked upon. And to kind of go a little bit more detail on the engineering side of it, the question is GIS something that would be fairly standard to learn with a civil engineering degree? I can tell you, everyone that I pass through the halls here, they know about GIS and they understand what it is and what it can do for them.
Gotcha. Grant, do you have anything to add to those two questions? I'd like to give you an opportunity to, if you'll be brief. I'm running out of time here.
Yeah, understood. So the port is focusing on environmental sustainability, and so we've undergone multiple projects. One, we're changing out all of our lighting to LED, and we have over 1,000 high mast poles at all of our facilities. So quite a bit of lighting, and each high mast pole has like 8 or 10 lights on it. So we've worked on that. We're in the process of retrofitting our trucks and vehicles from polluting diesel and gas to electric where we can. So the port's very focused, particularly recently, the last couple of years, on environmental sustainability, and we help support those projects by providing the GIS content for where the infrastructure and these assets are located, and mapping all of that. That's kind of all I got on the sustainability.
That's all right. Great. Thank you all. I want to appreciate each and every one of you for taking your time and this half hour. We really appreciate it. It seemed to go by fairly quickly. Thank you. Those students that are here, give me 1 second. I've got to switch some stuff here around. But I appreciate each and every one of you for being here and watching this. And we thank you. Please also go to our website. There's a code there that you can do your fill out the sort of feedback, how you thought the panel went. Please do so. And also, teachers, if you would let us know how many students were in your class, we'd like to know that also. Thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. Have a great day.
Thank you.